Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce Ilaria Marsili. She is the head of the European Project Management at the European Research Innovation Office, ERIO, within the Research and Innovation Services of University College in London. Ilaria, she has over 13 years experience in managing and delivering large-scale, complex, multi-partner and multidisciplinary research and innovation projects. She has joined UCL in 2011 and as a European project manager and became in 2015 the head of the European Project Management Services. Today, she leads staff for delivering a 1 million portfolio of European funded projects, most of which are coordinated directly by UCL. Ilaria, she is a certified project manager and program manager. She has a strong expertise in project and program management, budget monitoring, engagement of stakeholders, management of risk, issues, and organizational change. She has also a great interest in international relationships, and she is a genuine passion for leading large and complex research initiatives. So, Ilaria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the invite. Thank you, the participants, for joining today. Without further ado, I will start sharing my presentation. Bear with me a second. Now put into presentation mode. Sorry, let me go to the. Can you confirm that you can see my slides? You know, when you put the slides in presentation mode, you can't really see the screen.
Yes, first slide is there.
Okay, perfect. And Carla, feel free to interrupt me if I go above the time allocated. Right, so today my presentation will focus on grant agreement preparation and signature. I will touch upon quickly on consortium agreement to then dive into a bit project implementation. And finally, if we have time, I'm happy to share with you what I think are the most common challenges and rewards coming from the EC projects. Now, just to give you a quick recap about the grant life cycle, as you all know, the first stage is characterized by the application, submission of your proposal, and evaluation, followed by the invitation, again, if successful, to enter the grant agreement preparation phase. Now, usually this phase will last roughly 3 months, and it will be one of the most challenging phases of your lives, and you will understand why later on. Most of the times you will be successful. Actually, yeah, again, most of the times. And then this means that you can finally sign your grant agreement. And this is when then your project will start. Therefore, you will then go into the post-award phase, the project implementation phase, which is characterized by monitoring, reporting, and then finally you will be able to conclude your grant. Now, we will shortly be focusing on the gap phase. So this is a phase that will be entirely done through the electronic portal of the European Commission, which is called Funding and Tenders Portal. So I'll be referring to this as simply as portal. So what happens basically after you've received the letter that invites you to the grant agreement preparation stage, you will be asked to translate your proposal into what will become your grant agreement. Unlike, in Horizon Europe, basically, the European Commission will not be able to ask you any major changes. So the proposal that has been reviewed, evaluated, and awarded will be likely will become your grant agreement and its annexes. Basically, the work plan that you and your collaborators or consortium partners, depending as to whether it is a mono or multi-beneficiary grant, will have to follow. Will become, let's say, some sort, your Bible, to follow through the implementation of your project. Now, you will be the European Commission. Obviously, you will not be able to negotiate much, nor the European Commission to ask you to implement any major changes, as I said. However, no negotiation does not mean no changes at all. For example, the European Commission will allow you to fix some mistakes, clerical errors, inconsistencies, you might need to address some of the requirements included in few reports that you might receive from the European Commission reviewers. For example, the ethics review report or a security scrutiny report. And finally, what is called ESR, Evaluation Summary Report. This is the report that has been put together by the panel of experts who reviewed your proposal, and that might contain some of the shortfalls. For example, I don't know, just to give an example, please try to expand more on the excellence section, or please make sure that you describe more in detail the open science practice. So the reviewers will provide you through this report very useful comments that you may or you may not need to address during the GAP process. And this will primarily depend on your project officer, because some project officers they will be asking you to address the shortfalls. Others will let you finalize the grant agreement process without addressing them. Now, it's a collaborative process. Of course, it will depend as to whether your project involves or not other beneficiaries. Just to give you a quick overview of how it looks, the funding and tenders portal. So with your login details, you will be able to enter your project, and you will be able to see what are the documents that will be exchanged with the European Commission. You will be able to communicate with the project officer, and also you will be able to see the process history. Why? Because during these 3 months, you will be submitting your what is called grant data, potentially several times, 2, if not 3 times, until the European Commission deems that your grant agreement is ready for the signature. It's a very, I would say, user-friendly portal that will be showing you what are the tabs that you need to fill out electronically. Again, the tabs will vary according to the different types of grant, but it will include all the basic information about your project. So reporting periods, budget, list of the beneficiaries where applicable, work packages, description where applicable, deliverables, milestones, risks, again, where applicable, because, depending, each project will have a different structure. And the good thing is that everything is done electronically, and you and your collaborators can follow the progress of the GAP preparation. Few things to be aware of during this process. Extremely tight deadlines. So especially if it's not a mono grant and actually includes many, let's say, between 10 or 20 partners, you will find quite difficult to meet deadlines set by European Commission, because it will take time to collect and collate input from the different partners, review them, and then submit. So really make sure that during that phase, you and your collaborators can really focus on the activities and the tasks required by the European Commission. Make sure that the partners are aware of the process. Some partners might be, newcomers for the program. So what is useful is to have a meeting at the beginning of the GAP phase, and to explain them all the various steps, and also to make sure that they are clear about when and what will be expected from them. So this also means to keep them informed every time that you submit the grant data, and to share with them the most up-to-date files. Keep DC informed. Your project officer can be your best ally and your worst enemy, and you definitely want them to be the former. There will be inevitably delays. I've never seen, GAP going according to the plan. But I've also witnessed a lot of flexibility from European Commission, as long as you keep them informed. Finally, again, you might need to work outside normal working hours, again, to meet deadlines, but it's worth it because then you will get your grant at the end of these 3 months and use your negotiation skills. These are key. With European Commission officers to negotiate a postponement of deadlines or changes that you might need to implement to your grant, but also with your partners. So, well, after all the sweat and tears of these 3 months, you have hopefully reached the end of the gap phase, and you are in the position to sign the grant agreement. For multi-beneficiary grants, what happens that so the coordinator first signed the grant agreement. This is then countersigned by the European Commission, and then finally the partners will be signing something that is called accession forms. So this is the time for you to celebrate and to receive your awaited grant agreement. So how is it structured? You have a part which we usually call terms and conditions, where you will have a data sheet including basic information about your project and also all the articles, including all the rights and responsibilities that you and your collaborators / partners will have to abide to for the whole duration of the project. But again, we won't have time today to dive into all the articles. And also, what is important, all the annexes to your grant agreement. This slide is pretty much self-explanatory. Perhaps, just FYI, the Annex 1, also called Description of the Action, will be divided into a Part A and Part B. It will include all the tables, for example, work package tables, again, where applicable, deliverables, milestones, risks, person months, and then you will have the narrative part. Of course, depending on the project, you will have a different Part A and Part B structure. Annex 5 is also an important annex because it will include specific rules for your project regarding communication, dissemination, research, ethics, and IPR matters. So this is the grant agreement in a nutshell, but now let's look into the consortium agreement. So the consortium agreement is an internal agreement to the consortium that is a requirement, especially for multi-beneficiary, therefore collaborative grants. This is an agreement that it's negotiated internally only by the consortium partners. Most of the times is a requirement of the call. The granting authority does not need to review nor approve the consortium agreement. And one of the most widely used template for consortium agreement is the DESCA model that you can find available on the website that I've written here on the slides. Why is very useful and widely and very much used by all organizations involved in new grants, because it includes all the provisions, but also the elucidation notes. So they will allow you to understand why there is a certain provision, and also because there will be some options that you and your legal department will have to choose, and therefore these elucidation notes will help you understanding what is the best option that suits your consortium needs. Now, even if when it's not in a mandatory requirement, my suggestion is that if your grant involves more than one beneficiary, this is always important because it will help you and your collaborators set out internal arrangement and better manage the grant, because you want to have an agreement that spells out how the consortium should be organized, when the payments are happening, what are the rights and obligations relating to background and results. Also, you want to have a means that will help you settle disputes. And finally, also to regulate matters such as liability and confidentiality. So this is a very good best practice to have in place. The most important thing is that the consortium agreement should not contradict the grant agreement, but should complement the articles that you have in your grant agreement. So once you have reached the end of the grant agreement phase, you've potentially also signed your consortium agreement again when needed. This is when you can start your project. Now, obviously, the project implementation phase is characterized by many activities that we won't have the time to look into. But I wanted to focus perhaps on, let's say, four main activities. What to do to set up a grant, how the payments are regulated, the reporting, the open science, shortly touch upon the open science concept, and finally, what to do about knowledge and IP management. Bear in mind that so all the main there are certain steps that are really important, especially when you set up your grant, for example, to arrange the kickoff meeting, the governance structure. And all the information around this activity can go into, at least this is our best practice at UCL, is to create a project handbook, is to have this deliverable, or let's say could also be like an internal document, including all the processes and procedures that will help you and your collaborators to better manage the grant. So in terms of grant setup kickoff meeting, I think this is very important. Either if your grant involves many partners, or let's say this is a mono grant, you should organize a meeting at the beginning of the project to make clear the roles and responsibility of everyone, to basically to touch upon the main idea of why you want to do this project, how this project will be delivered, what is the impact that you want to bring with your project. But of course, the structure, the agenda, and the participants will change based on the type of project. For monogrants, for example, you may want to invite the members of the grants office, or perhaps staff from your department and your immediate team. Here, I've just thought it would be good to include you an example of agenda for a collaborative kickoff meeting. Something to also think about is a governance structure. Again, governance structure should be tailored to the project's needs. And here I've just included as example, again, a collaborative grants governance structure. You may want to have a general assembly, let's say a body that takes all the important decisions. You want to have a management support team that will be focusing on the day-to-day management of the grant. And also you may want to appoint some advisory boards, especially if you need external expert that might provide you and your collaborators or consortium partners with advice on specific matters, which could be IP, could be research integrity, open science, ethics, you name it. You really have to think of what will best work for your project. And the governance structure, again, for collaborative grants will usually be described in the consortium agreement. There's not much to say here, but again, it's important to focus on the communication, how you want to communicate internally and externally to the consortium. So you may need to set up mailing list, a project repository to use to share documents with your collaborators or partners. For external communication, sometimes, most of the times, actually would be a requirement to have, a website. You want to create, therefore, a project identity, and also you may be asked to set up some social media through which you and your collaborators will be able to communicate and disseminate the project results. Finally, please make sure that you design and share with your partners templates that will help you to, for example, keep track of action decided, agreed upon during meetings. Actions log, for example. You may want to have a template, and you will need to have a budget monitoring template, a template to monitor the deliverables and milestones, risks and issues. So these are just some of the templates that you will need to design at the beginning of the grant, of the project, and they will help you managing successfully your project. Now let's look into the payments briefly. So how does it work for your European grants? So you will definitely receive a pre-financing at the beginning of your grant. The idea is to basically provide you and or your partners, again, depending as to whether it's a mono or multi-beneficiary grant, with a float so that you can start activities, you can buy consumables, equipment, and hire staff. Now, the percentage of pre-financing will change project by project, but not to worry. During the gap phase, you will be able to identify this amount on the portal. Therefore, you and your collaborators can make plans on how to best spend the pre-financing. Something to remember is this mutual insurance mechanism, which in Horizon 2020 was called Guarantee Fund. The European Commission will basically keep between the 5 and the 8% of the total project budget, basically what is also called maximum grant amount, and will be releasing this amount only at the very end of the project, only if the balance is positive, meaning that the EC is going to provide you with the final payment. Then you will receive payments at the end of each reporting period once you've submitted your reports, and this has been accepted by European Commission, and then obviously a final payment. Usually you have 60 days after the end of each reporting period to submit the report to the European Commission, which then they evaluate, and then if happy, they will release the payments to the coordinator. Reporting. So linked to payment, yes, it's really reporting. Obviously, the European Commission, they need to make sure, they need to be able to assess that the beneficiaries comply with the rules. They've carried out the work as described in the Annex 1 to the grant agreement. Therefore, the consortium, the coordinator, then the consortium are obliged to submit some reports. Now, there are two different types, let's say, of reporting. So what is called continuous reporting, which is always active throughout the implementation of the project. And this section will basically will be there for, and also even after the end of your grant, you will be using this section to submit deliverables, to report progress in achieving milestones. Again, where applicable, not all projects will have milestones. To follow up on critical risks, again, where applicable, but especially to communicate, to update the European Commission about the communication, dissemination, and exploitation activities, and also to complete some questionnaires, which again, they change project by project. You then have a periodic, you then have a formal periodic report. Now, I will skip through these slides because, I mean, they contain a lot of text. I wanted you to have a written text you can refer to, but we won't have time to look into the details. What I would like you to remember is that, yes, at the end of each reporting period, you have to submit a periodic report, which is usually divided into a technical part and a financial part. Obviously, the financial part will change. For collaborative grants based on actual cost, you will have to include all the costs that have been incurred for the period, and provide with a certificate on financial statement when you have reached a certain expenditure. Needless to mention that there are some projects, actually they're called the lump sum projects, where the financial report does not apply. You need to know that this is a relatively new type of project, let's put it in this way. These projects are based on a predetermined budget, i.e. the lump sum, and project will be based not on the basis of reimbursement of costs incurred, but rather work carried out and achievement of milestones. So this means that you won't have any financial report to submit. If we want to look at quickly at the Marie Curie project, they share the same periodic report template of the collaborative grants. However, the financial part will obviously be different because, as you know, Marie Curie are based on unit cost, and the financial statements are extremely easy. The reason being that they are automatically calculated by the DC portal, based on the number of months the researcher, the fellow, has been employed by the host institution. The ERC periodic reporting instead is different from the others. They have a technical part that is split into a scientific progress report and the technical report. And you can see here from the, these are the sections that characterize the technical part. And then you have the financial part. Again, if they are not a lump sum, then you will have to declare actual cost. But on top of that, you will also have to upload an Excel file showing the workforce, so the staff that was basically that worked for the ERC grant. This is not a mandatory requirement like the other two that I've just shown you, but in my opinion is a very good practice, especially I would say for large collaborative grants where you have a lot of partners and you don't want to wait until the end of the reporting period to find out that, I don't know, that, work is not going well. Maybe there were deviations, maybe new risks have emerged, or perhaps some partners might be overspending or underspending. So my suggestion is to set some internal reporting, perhaps every 6 or 9 months. And again, with regards to the content of the internal report templates, I mean, here I've just provided you with an example, but these internal reports can be designed as to fit the needs of the coordinator and the consortium as a whole. But this really proves an important tool, especially for the coordinator, to better monitor the project. Open science, open access, and RDM. So open science is the concept of making sure that knowledge is shared as quickly as possible and as open as possible. This translates into a couple of requirements that are very important in Horizon Europe. First of all, the open access to peer-reviewed publications must be immediate, and the scientific publication should also need to be deposited in a trusted repository under a certain license. For example, the license suggested is the CC BY or equivalent. What is important here is that in Horizon Europe, the publication fees are reimbursable only if the publishing venue is fully open access. You can still potentially publish in hybrid journals, but those publishing fees will not be deemed eligible, and therefore you won't get the reimbursement from the European Commission. Same concept applies to research data. The European Commission They want you to provide open access also to research data and its metadata in line with the fair principle. Because I mean, ultimately, you have to think that you're using taxpayers' money. Therefore, it's obvious that the European Commission, they want that the results that you have achieved, you have generated, thanks to research that was funded by public money, is also made available freely to the public, and they don't have to pay for any subscription fees to the journals. And likely in the past few years, there are also a lot of journals now. Most of the journals, they now comply with open access requirements, and it's not so difficult like the beginning. The European Commission also makes available to the beneficiaries. Let me go to the other slide. They make available an open access publishing platform for which you don't have to pay. And if you publish through Open Research Europe, you will be meeting all the open access requirements.
We are almost there, Ilaria.
Yes. So knowledge and IP management. So again, the message here is basically, so you have to consider that, especially when involving different actors, different partners, obviously they will all have different interest. Universities, they want to publish early. SMEs or industrial partners, they will want to protect because they want to patent. So it's important not to underestimate the importance of IP management at the different stages of the project life cycle. At the beginning, to understand what IP is available, what IP you need access to, during the project implementation to monitor what IP has been generated, if you want to protect it, if you want to publish it, and after, once the project ends, what are the best IP arrangement that you should put in place with your. So do not underestimate this importance, because it could lead to conflicts, and make sure that you are supported by your legal department. And this is just a table for you to refer to in terms of access to background, which is the knowledge that you hold prior to joining the project, and then the access to the results that are generated during implementation of the grant. Finally, some takeaway messages. Make sure that you involve collaborators and partners that know how to carry out a certain task, rather than people that you just know, because then you need to rely on experts that they know how to do and when to do it. Do not underestimate the time that needs to be dedicated to management, and involve staff with relevant expertise. Even if Horizon rules are simpler, let's say, than in the former programs, still it's very, you as coordinator, you won't have time, you as researcher, you won't have time to dive through all the legal and the financial requirements. Therefore, you need to be supported by relevant experts. Focus on people and not on hierarchical management structure. Research management is a people business. Make sure that you have a very good relationship with the EC, because you will likely have to change some of your grant, your project during the implementation. So you want to keep them engaged since the beginning and throughout the grant. IP, devote enough time and expertise to IP matters, and also cultural differences. Make sure, especially in when engaging with collaborators or multi-partners grants, this is so great to have people coming from different backgrounds, but this can also lead to conflict. So be mindful of cultural differences. And maybe if I go another 5 minutes. So again, these are what I think the three main challenges. They're highly competitive. So in addition to write a great proposal, make sure that your proposal really stands out. You have the extra factor, because they are highly competitive. make sure that you have the relevant support to navigate the terms and conditions. We're talking about documents that are 400 pages and more. And also the European Commission will evaluate and review your grant. And you might be audited. And there are different levels of audits that can be quite painful. But despite all the drawbacks, I think that the rewards are higher because you'll be part of a consortium. You will be able to achieve results that you won't be able to achieve individually or through, let's say, a national grant. Do not underestimate international cooperation, and also this will let you grow your network and potentially gain more funding in the future. And finally, because you will be working with people from different sectors and different areas of scientific areas, this really, in this way, you will be able to develop and enhance your skills. This is a slide for you to refer to with some helpful documents and resources. But also feel free to contact me anytime should you have any questions. Thank you very much for listening.